Hi, everyone. Welcome to Commissioner Wilson's virtual office hours. Hi, Commissioner.
Hi, Lee. How are you?
Wonderful. How are you doing today?
Good. We're still plugging along here. I know we're in different places and I miss sitting right next to you on the couch, but we're going to be back there soon.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't seen you or given you a hug in forever.
I know. It does feel.
For those of you who are just tuning in, welcome. Thank you so much for being a part of this opportunity to be transparent in local government and to answer your questions live every week during Commissioner Wilson's virtual office hours. Thursdays at 4 o'clock, it's your chance to ask questions. You can drop them in the comment box area and we can answer them live. Commissioner, how was your Martin Luther King Jr. Day?
So it wasn't as publicly engaged as I would have loved. I think, last year we were able to do a day of service out in the community. And this year, with COVID exposure here in my household, we were trying to be really careful. So it was a little bit more of a quiet day of service and reflection. But, I think embodying the work towards equity and towards justice doesn't have to always be loud. I love the parades and I love the time that we get a chance to look back at the writing and the speaking of a great civil rights leader. But I think right now being really focused on the work, which was voting rights and equal justice, can be as quiet and behind the scenes as public. So it was sort of the way that I had to go this particular MLK Day. What about you?
Mine was great. I really take the time to think about something that my grandma said when I first was telling her that I was scared to have children because of the state of the world. And she actually brought up Martin Luther King Jr. and brought up that during that time when he was assassinated, she had little ones. And, she just said that it didn't seem like a good time for her to have children at that point, but you don't give up hope. And, by having children, you're actually creating hope for the future. And so I always reflect on that whenever that time comes around.
Actually, I love that. And I'm probably going to write that down after this to remember myself, because I think capturing those moments of how do we hold on to the hopeful things when we're feeling up against a wall, and how far we've come. We still have a long way to go, but I love that she pointed that out, and it's really true. And I think about really Martin Luther King's teachings were so foundationally about love and leading with love and fighting hate with love. And sometimes when we engage in settings of like frustrating settings where justice should have prevailed and we haven't seen it yet, and my sort of passionate reaction is sometimes showing that frustration, and then I try to temper that by understanding that the greatest change makers in our world they've brought good trouble, but they always led with love. And so it's a good day to remind ourselves of that, and to keep keep refocusing and reframing on the issues that were a priority then, that are still a priority. And we look at what I feel like is an attack on some of our fundamental voting rights in this country, piece by piece, in different states, in states that have had traditionally put up barriers for minority communities to be able to access the vote. And so, how can all these years later people have, the day of, they put up their Martin Luther King quote and then turn around and support a government that hasn't supported voting rights? And we have to demand that that they actually come to terms with that if you're going to support somebody who you think is an embodiment of Martin Luther King Jr.'s actions, you ask them, where are you on voting rights? And where are you on access in minority communities? And where are you on access to the ballot box in disabled communities? Because that was, these were the conversations that he probably envisioned that would be getting closer to resolution than where we are today. So the march continues.
Right. And it's absolutely crazy that there are people on record who are voting against voting rights. And I'm interested in seeing how the primaries go and how this upcoming election year is going to go, because that, for anyone who considers that themselves a patriot of the United States, a lover of this country, that should be a slap in the face to you and how you feel this country should be represented.
I mean, for the life of me, I cannot figure out why anybody who considers themselves a member of a free and democratic society, right? That if we are going to raise that flag and badge of freedom and democracy, how you can't really believe and fight for equal open voting laws. Now, there's this very insidious rallying cry on the other side that says that there's voting security issues, or that there are fraudulent votes being cast. But if you look at the data, it's overwhelming how safe and secure voting is. Here in Florida, we sort of know that the big fraud that we're dealing with is on the campaign side, on
Right.
dark money that's going into campaigns, and candidates that aren't real candidates, that are never going to actually want to lead. They're just in there to manipulate a ballot. That is a bigger issue. And if our lawmakers were really interested on free and fair elections, they'd be addressing the dark money that's going into these campaigns.
Right.
Limiting access to ballot boxes, limiting access to, for people who have to do absentee balloting. That's not how we get to a fair and free democracy. And if you had to win your elected seat by restricting some other American from voting, then you don't belong there. You don't belong there.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I joked around with my friends that if I ever ran for any type of office, my slogan would be check the contributions. And that is now just like in general, my stance on, if you're going to vote for someone, check the contributions.
That's it. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
It doesn't matter Democrat or Republican at this point.
No, no. It does not matter. This is a across the board, across the aisle issue. You ask them, who are you working for? Right. Who do you work for? It's a simple question.
Right. And some things shouldn't be politicized. We know the right to vote should be a human right to vote. It shouldn't be a one party over the other's right to vote. Yes. Same thing with COVID. COVID and health, public health, should not be a politicized issue. But as we saw from this week's news, it's becoming a political issue, especially here in Florida.
So sadly, this week has been particularly, I think, frightening for the medical community, for people who work in public health, and they've been under attack since the beginning of this. And here in Orange County, of course, since the beginning of the pandemic, Orange County has its own health services department, and we are so fortunate to have some really amazing medical professionals. But we work hand in hand with the state of Florida's Department of Health, and the state of Florida Department of Health has an Orange County division. Well, the face of that division has, since the beginning of the pandemic, been Raul Pino, this really engaging, brilliant physician who has helped really answer questions in difficult times to the public, to those of us who are trying to also be accountable to the public. And everyone should be horrified by this. He was essentially put on leave this week for encouraging the employees at the Department of Health to take Department of Health recommendations. So, he put out an email, and from all reports, he put out an email pretty much recommending that the employees at the Department of Health, and these are state employees, these aren't the county employees, because the county had the ability to take a different approach with our staff, and being able to provide some different opportunities. And so it is a different division. And I know it's confusing when you hear Orange County's Department of Health. Yes, we work very closely and partnered for the vaccination sites, for testing sites. Dr. Pino represents that, state agency right here in Orange County. And Dr. Pino, in his email was critical of the percentages of people who had been vaccinated and who were taking, this seriously enough to get their booster, knowing that right now that the breakthrough cases and numbers of people who are spreading this, it just continues to go up. And honestly, Lee, we'd be done with this by now. You talk to virologists about what's going on with the spread. We'd be done with this by now.
Right.
If the first time Dr. Pino spoke about getting vaccinated, people listened to him.
Right.
The very first time people were like, all right, let's be done. We'd be done. Now we may, we would see some of these probably potentially seasonal breakthrough, but nothing like we're seeing in the type of hospitalizations still, and the type of losses we're seeing from really critical staffing shortages in essential places in our society. People, complain about flights getting canceled and about not being able to get their deliveries. And then on the same token, they're like, yeah, we don't really need the vaccination. I'm gonna let my natural immunity take this.
Right.
Listen, ask your natural immunity how you're not dealing with smallpox.
Right. Exactly. And it's, when I saw that Dr. Pino was on leave, it really sent a scary feeling down my spine that now people's jobs and their professions are going to be scrutinized, and people are going to feel like they can't speak out, and people are going to feel afraid to do their job, with the thought of constituents in the forefront of their mind being safe. And that should not be a punishable offense. That should be the standard, the norm, the preference.
He's a public health official who got in trouble for issuing public health guidance.
Right. To his own team.
And if you think that that's something that you should support, and you're about small government, you are really sort of looking at small government differently than I would, right? Because this is a government entity, our governor, telling our health professionals to censor. Right. We're censoring them. Right. And we're not censoring their opinions. We're censoring their facts. These are facts. And it's happened at the University of Florida, where the governor didn't let professors report data. And it happened here in our very own health department. It's terrifying. And, for my friends who were, supporters of the current leadership in Tallahassee, I would ask you to really examine what you believe are small government priorities, and is that the dictating of public health? And I get it. They frame it in this really strange, like, well, it's because he was sort of hinting that people need to get their vaccination. And I'm like, that is literally a public health recommendation.
Right. He didn't threaten anybody's job. He just said that he was actually surprised that so few people were vaccinated in his same department. And
the reality of it is
that it's very irresponsible.
Right. And how snowflakey sensitive can you be that's going to hurt your feelings? If you are one of the people that decided that you were, for whatever reason, going to assume the risk and not get that vaccination, then just take the criticism. How is that hurting you to be criticized by facts? So it's very disappointing, not fully surprising, but it should really sound the alarm, I think, for people. I would hope for people who haven't been tuned in to this filtered or censored scientific, what I feel like is an attack on our scientific community, an attack on our medical community. And this is from somebody who took his medical degree and tried to put it to the best public use.
Well, I just have to say, I think we should probably have somebody come and do a virtual office hour with us to talk about what else is going on at the legislative level up there, because abortion rights are at risk. Net metering is at risk. We have the woke act that we have to figure out what the heck that even means. And, trans children being allowed to play with other children. I mean, the list goes on and on. And meanwhile, there are really serious issues that should be paid attention to, like the fact that last year we had a record number of manatee deaths, and we need better regulations on fertilizer and on septic tanks. And those things are happening very slowly, but they should be way more of a priority than, taking away the ability for us to teach about our Black history in the way that it actually occurred. You know what I mean?
Why are we censoring historical events?
Right.
Why do we think it's okay to dismantle what is, and really most important, I think, components of local control, which is, our ability to take a look at some of the business practices and consumer protections. That one of the bills that are up this month literally allows any business out there who may be dealing with an ordinance, a local ordinance, that may, impact their bottom line. So they can be operating a business practice that is really dangerous to the public. And if a local government does something, puts an ordinance in place to try to protect the public, if it costs that business anything, that business can sue the local government, and not just for their potential loss, but also for fees and attorney costs. And it's a litigation heyday. And I will tell you, as somebody that was called a radical attorney for working on anti-pollution measures, I'm just like, that's radical. That is radical. The idea that, if we're going to try to do anything to protect consumers in our own community, knowing that oversight has pretty much been guaranteed and left with local government, knowing that that's our main streets and our commerce centers, it's been ripped away. It's been ripped away. And, right. I mean, it's pretty terrifying what's going on up in Tallahassee right now.
Right. And this isn't anything new, right? So there's a lot of things in this seat that I think, Commissioner, you and I both turn around and realize, oh, we're not allowed to do that because we're preempted at the state level. One major thing that I think is the massive amounts of growth and toll roads and the roads to nowhere movement that is just killing all of our natural resources and deforesting all of our conservation areas. One of note is one that you really championed during your election, Split Oak.
Yeah, before
it's coming back.
Yeah. Listen, the final straw for me as a private citizen who wasn't sure about what to do next, and my frustration about the never-ending gobbling of Florida natural landscapes that have been turned into toll roads, was, of course, Split Oak Forest. It's a treasure here in Central Florida. A long time ago, Orange County and Osceola County got together. Our predecessors got together with the Florida Conservation Trust to fund, through taxpayer dollars, a really important piece of conservation land that should be held in conservation forever. The Florida Constitution guarantees that those things aren't unraveled, aren't dismantled for any other reason than if there is no longer conservation value. That's what is in our Florida Constitution. It really is clear as a bell that says, the only time that we are permitted to undo conservation is if there's no longer conservation value. And it's the opposite there. That is still and continues to be a treasure. It has been restored and invested in. FWC has worked really hard, Friends of Split Oak Forest. And, there's been a collaborative effort in restoration and preservation. And last year, during the 2020, or, now we're in 2022, but in 2020, the Orange County voters, in a overwhelming majority, almost 85% of voters, approved an extra layer of protection for Split Oak Forest. And so, I was informed this week by somebody outside of our county that Orange County even with me sitting right there in the building, or, being officially an elected representative, that Orange County continues to march on with its pursuit of unraveling those protections, for the benefit of a toll road. Now, a toll road, for those of you who have to take toll roads, it's a regressive tax. You pay every day. You're paying your taxes.
It never ends.
Resident that helped go to buy that property, and then they're going to turn around, take it away from you, and put a toll road up where you're going to have to pay again to use that toll road. It's a regressive tax,
right?
And it's to benefit private development. It is literally at the request of a private developer. So yeah, my frustration level, if you can see the hives breaking out on my neck right now, because hearing that the application from Orange County and Osceola County is continuing on to the state of Florida, to Florida Conservation Trust, which is a part of, a state agency that will then review. There's a board that will review the application. I sent an email today, tried to pursue the status because no one's briefed me. And, I asked, we had a Central Florida Expressway, which is the toll road authority here. And they were the entity that actually put forward the preferred route through Split Oak Forest. And so just to try to explain what Central Florida Expressway Authority is, Department of Transportation under the state of Florida is the agency that oversees the majority of the transportation projects in the state of Florida. We have multiple sub-agencies, if you will, that work on regional plans and regional projects. Central Florida Expressway Authority is one of those. So it's made up of board members who represent the surrounding counties: Osceola County, Lake County, Orange County, Seminole County. Yes. And the city of Orlando and the state. So there are, the governor does appoint also. Well, to really give sort of the breakdown of what happened within the time frame of the Expressway Authority's initial plans to go through Split Oak Forest, is that the public got wind of it. And really there was what, appropriately should have been a lot of questions from the public about why this was the preferred route. And there was never any good answers. There was absolutely an alternative route that went outside of the conservation land. And so the private developer that is interested in using that land as their shortcut said, you know what, if you give us this conservation land as our shortcut, we're going to give you some extra conservation land. We'll do a swap. You give us this and we'll give you that. And the problem with that plan is that a land swap for conservation land falls under a different set of scrutiny and requires a different threshold to be passed by the local government. And Orange County couldn't do it, couldn't get there, because before I was even on that board, there were commissioners that didn't approve of that disposal of conservation land.
Right.
So instead, what they did was they came back and said, you know what, never mind. We don't want to, we're going to donate the land. It's not a land swap. We're going to donate the land. But what we're going to do is we're going to apply for what we call a utility easement through here. It's just going to be sort of this, we're going to ask for this just corridor to use, not really unraveling the protections. Well, no, it's a toll road. The provision they're using now is set into place to be able to use for types of utility lines, piping, that kind of thing. It's not put in place for the size toll road that they're trying to put through there. So, we'll see what happens. I'm going to continue to try to update residents who I know are interested in this issue. I think many of them, when the charter amendment passed last year, thought, yay, look, the good guys won. We're going to be able to say that this is safe land. They'll be surprised that that's not the case, and that we just have to keep asking the questions until finally they get the picture. We don't want another toll road. We don't want any more public property swapped away, traded away, given away for a toll road, period.
Right. segues into our next ball of wax, the Gotha Turnpike meeting that happened this past week. It just seems like it's just like, woo, 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 another one.
Well, I had the opportunity to meet with the residents of Gotha this week. They put together a community meeting, sort of an emergency community meeting about the turnpike expansion through Gotha. And for people who live in District 1, I feel like these are constant wrestling matches because we just went through this in Winter Garden where the Turnpike Authority put out plans to try to bisect a historically significant community in Tildenville, and they put a ramp down right next to Tupker Ranch. And, there are impacts right now in Oakland from the Turnpike Authority. Well, Gotha has, really had such challenges since the Turnpike was built. And then, where the 408 branched off from the Turnpike, of course, it runs right through Gotha. And now there are plans to widen the Turnpike right through that same area. Their issues there in Gotha is that it's really got some beautiful natural surface water, some lakes in a closed basin system. And whenever there's any development or any building that happens, there should be retention of stormwater runoff as a result of that paving. We continue to pave things, and if you can think about being at the beach and you pour your bucket of water over your sand, and you watch what happens in the sand, and it kind of just percolates through. If you took that bucket out to the parking lot and you poured it over, it would run. You take it to a tabletop and it runs, right? And that is really what's happening all over our county, that when we pave over surfaces, the natural absorption of our ground that is able to retain and recharge water is changed. And Gotha has dealt with really unmitigated flooding for several years now, since way before I came into office. It was one of the things that I was able to talk to residents about when I was running for office. And Orange County did pay for a study that more or less showed that the Turnpike Authority's plans in that area were the cause, had definite impacts, and that the stormwater runoff as a result of the Turnpike's development plans were identified. Well, there was discussion at that time that when there was some kind of an update to the Turnpike there, whether it's a resurfacing or some other expansion, that they would be able to reevaluate, revisit, and scrutinize it for maybe a fix to this, right? Like, this is going to be the opportunity. We're going to be putting some money into doing something here. Why wouldn't we fix the problem? Do you think that happened, Lee?
I doubt it.
No, it didn't. The Turnpike Authority instead found a loophole that said that nobody had to review the plans for stormwater retention or runoff because it was a resurfacing project and not an expansion project.
Right.
So even our, really basic reviews that take place at the water management district level, the state water management district level, didn't get to happen here. So there's going to be another meeting. We're going to try to put together another meeting, and really, I would love to be able to see residents from this area and from really all over who have also encountered these struggles, right? I'm listening to this group of residents who are really struggling, and they feel really alone in this. And I'm thinking, this sounds just like my residents and at Sand Lake, who are dealing with the I-4 ultimate and the outfall there. And this sounds like my residents, who are dealing at Johns Lake, who are dealing with the Turnpike Authority and some of the things that happen on 50 right there. And, you can do this all over the county and understand that maybe we can get some collaborative ideas and moving forward also in a very public facing way, saying, look, if you're going to cause the impacts to these residents and to their lakes, you're going to help come up with solutions. So we're going to continue to engage that. Stay tuned for a community meeting date and time and place for to talk about the Gotha and the Turnpike expansion, the Gotha impacts there. Nearland Gardens is right there, Lee, and it's historic. It's a treasure. It's a rural settlement, which means that should be protections in place. Historic areas should be regarded with higher scrutiny, not less scrutiny, not find a loophole and don't bother looking at it. So yeah, we will be putting together an agenda and date and time soon to be able to get back out there to try to help those folks in Gotha.
That's great. Sorry if you hear a little ringing, my phone is ringing. So let's talk about the upcoming Tuesday's Board of County Commission meeting. If you wanted to talk a little bit about what a Board of County Commission meeting is for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, because you had a lot of new followers over the holiday.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Sorry that I've been, I feel like we got really deep, really fast in this meeting. But in this office hours, but there was a lot to talk about. Yes, every 2 weeks, we have a Board of County Commissioners meeting, which really is where the business of the county happens. And the meetings themselves are divided into parts of an agendaed discussion, or a part of an agenda that we review as an office and review if it's impacting certain residents. We try to make sure that we're bringing it to them, and we review with staff. And then on the Tuesday of the meeting, there's a vote for components of the agenda. The consent agenda is oftentimes really one vote for approval for the entire set of agenda items within the consent agenda. And a lot of times it's things that the county is funding through grant programs or contracts that the county is either engaging in or renewing. It's where our procurement happens. So if the county is purchasing or entering into an agreement to do some kind of a project and has hired somebody for that, you'll see it in the consent agenda. And then we have a discussion agenda, which is a lot of times the sort of more things that are either up for a vote or having, well, it's an open discussion. And then we have a work session agenda, which is when the board has the opportunity to work through issues that may be coming back as an ordinance or are being considered as an update for something that's already in existence. So those work session agendas are oftentimes where that, the really interesting work of the government takes place, but it doesn't mean that the stuff that's in the consent agenda isn't really, really important. And there are some of those things coming up.
Right. So some good news, I didn't realize until I started this job that the HIV crisis is still increasing rapidly here in Orange County. And it sounds like there's some funds that are going to be allocated, which is a really great opportunity to share that this is still a problem. And it sounds like the county is actually trying to do something about it.
Yeah, we mentioned it earlier that the county has we're really fortunate to have an amazing health services department. And within that health services department, we are making some pretty, looks like some really good investments in services, HIV services. The numbers in Orange County have gone up, and we are very obviously focused on the pandemic that is COVID and how deadly it is, but we don't have a cure for HIV. And there are people who live with HIV and who are dealing with the impacts of HIV throughout their lives and require services and continue to need support. And so this investment to me really feels like a not just compassionate, but also addressing what I feel like is a statistical tick up in our HIV positive cases, in the hopes that we can try to prevent suffering. And so seeing these agenda items makes me feel proud of the work that health services is doing. And I know that everybody's always really focusing with a magnifying glass on the COVID component, but just know that there are a lot of wraparound services that we're investing in for people out there.
Awesome. Also, it sounds like PetSmart Charities gave some funding to the shelter, which is really great. I think that there's just so much need there and the resources are, very limited. So to get some funding is really great.
Yeah, we get to kind of be the good guys on that one too, because if you've gone to PetSmart, and I have a pet, so I go to PetSmart because it's one of the few places that I can walk mine through and, kind of enjoy showing off my pet. They'll ask you, do you want to round up, or they'll ask you, do you want to contribute $1 or whatever it is. And they use that money to then fund different grant opportunities out in the world. And some of those are spay and neuter programs, some of those are veterinary service programs. And so being able to see that come across here as funding opportunities tells me that we're doing things right and trying to get that money into veterinary offices and in our nonprofit rescue partners pockets to make sure that they're taking care of our pets, because those are our family members.
Right. And, this week you got an overview of the CIP project for the shelter, if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's going to be more information coming. So for our newer followers, Orange County Animal Shelter, it has really our community has outgrown our shelter, and our needs are higher than what its capability is. I have to really hold the Orange County Animal Services staff and leadership in high regard for really doing everything that they've been able to do with what they have, because it really needed to be replaced years ago. And there was a vote actually before I came into office to start the initial process of rebuilding a shelter or a new shelter, sort of looking into the understanding that our community is growing and the shelter needs to match that growth. It was put on pause, as many capital improvement projects were put on pause during COVID because we weren't sure about revenue sources. Well, as things started to stabilize and our revenue you seeing the stabilization of revenue, and we're seeing some of the assistance that we were getting in revenue recovery in other places, made me realize during our budget work session that there should be the opportunity to bring it back in to discussion and try to reprioritize it. So I did bring it up, and it led to some really important conversations about what was already earmarked. And one of those things was having an architect review plans for a new shelter on the current property. And something that takes a long time when you're a government entity is to acquire some property to build something. And so really, a high priority for me was to make sure that if we could hold on to the property that we already have and build the new shelter right there, that would save us a lot of time. Don't get me wrong, this is still going to take a lot of time. Anytime that we have a CIP project, this one is going to be a complete rebuilding. It has to happen in phases because it's still going to be an operational shelter. We don't get to close down OCAS or Orange County Animal Services while we build. So knowing that it's going to be in phases. And so this week we had the opportunity to get updated from staff on the way that phasing is going to look. I want to make sure that we're super, super transparent about the fact that phasing is not about funding. So funding has all been planned out, and the funding is going to match those phases. The phasing is really operational because construction can't happen all at once. So, it's a good thing that we're going to be on the same property, that Orange County Animal Shelter will stay at the same property because it's very centrally located. And I think it's got such great opportunities for, public outreach and adoption services, where it is near the Millennium Mall. I mean, this is, it's residential right behind it on one side, and on the other side, it's really easy to get to from different, major roadways. So I am really glad that we're not losing that property, because part of the conversation we had in budget was, well, that's valuable property. And do we sell? And, I just think going back to trying to find a piece of property would have added another several years to this. So, right. I wish that we had a new shelter yesterday, but seeing that we have a plan in place and these, that it's phased into segments tells me that we are moving. I'm going to be really impatient with it probably, because I know that I'm like our residents who wish that we had it right now. But in the meantime, let's continue to offer our support to animal services and continue to get the word out on how people can volunteer and how they can foster, adopt, and participate, with that shelter the way it is until we get it completely revamped.
Yeah, that's excellent. They have an awesome spay and neuter program. They did send us, which I just got before the virtual office hours, they did send us an update that their adoption rates went up by 34%. So they got a lot of dogs out and into happy homes, and cats and rabbits. So more to come there. Please volunteer with fellow rescues in the community too. The shelters really relying on those partnerships with rescues that help find fosters and get extra funding for medical needs for dogs that maybe the shelter doesn't have the capacity to really take care of.
And it's really something that obviously I think we all struggle with, because there are times where I think, well, if we had more funds that we could put into a behavioral specialist, would that help? And if we had more funds that we could put into, an extra space for people to come and do a meet with their current pet, would that help? But the reality of it is the dogs are the most successful when they're able to get out of that shelter environment, because it is so stressful. So, if you talk to some of the behavioral specialists, they'll tell you that they have a very difficult time making any progress when a dog is still in a shelter, but when they're in a foster environment, they can really get a lot of progress. And so,
Right.
I always point out that you are a foster failure yourself, and that you took on a really challenging case that probably, could have ended up in a euthanasia, with a beautiful animal that had a chronic illness and was, having a difficult time being placed. But because of being put in a household that provided a more calm environment, and the rescue was able to provide the necessary structure of medical services and funding for that, and then you provided the love and the nurturing, and that's the ideal environment for an animal that's waiting on a forever home. Now, not everybody has to be a foster failure, but a lot of us are, so it's okay. But it really does. There's a clear distinction. I think, my first sort of volunteer positions out there in the pet rescue world were at rescues that had their own facilities, and that's really just not the model anymore. They really want to be able to network with people and get those animals as pets in homes, because that's where they learn to be in homes and really have a chance to show who they are outside of a very stressful environment.
Absolutely. So please check out Animal Services new FAQ page. They're going to be updating that as the procurement process happens, and then they're going to have the design process start. And Commissioner, you really pushed to have a lot of opportunities for the community to give input on the design process. So when all of those things hit our office, we are going to blast them out and make sure that the public has access to that information as well.
Yeah, ideally, we will maybe bring somebody from that process back to virtual office hours. We did have our director of Orange County Animal Services for our office hours, and she's been so good about trying to make sure that we're getting all the information out. But I know it's a topic of near and dear to the hearts of so many of our residents. So we'll continue to make sure that we're informing people. While we're talking about this, I want to make sure that people are aware so that they can reach out to their state lawmakers and to the governor's office if it's something that they're interested in. There are, a number of bills that are being discussed in Tallahassee right now, and potential laws. And one of those is a preemption of the protections that we put into place here in Orange County to prevent the import of mass breeding pets. So, we passed our retail pet store ban, back in May, June. And right. This is something that after a lot of research was done, we came to find that the retail pet outlets really directly import from these large inhumane mass breeders in the Midwest. And we don't have any control over what's going on in the Midwest. The USDA is the only oversight that they get, and the USDA doesn't do a great job of it because they really also oversee every single agricultural business in the country. And so without fail, even the breeders, mass breeders, the puppy mills that are violated, that show violations through USDA, very rarely do they ever lose their ability to export those puppies. And so the law that's being presented right now, it's called like the Animal Protection Act or something really deceiving like that, preempts Orange County and the other counties and municipalities in Florida that have taken steps to protect animals and have taken steps to protect consumers. And so what they are putting under the disguise of a Animal Protection Act really ends up being a complete preemption of any local oversight. And what they're saying is that they're going to have this, that they'll have the DBPR do the oversight. Well, the DBPR, the Department of Business Regulation at the state, is the same entity that oversees our roofing contractors. And for anybody that's had a roofer without a license come to your door, you know that they can't keep their eyes on everything, right? And so that is an entity that then also says that they will double check, or that they are going to make sure that they're, that the retail pet stores have identified who their importers are, where they're getting, they're sourcing their pets, and that they have to have USDA certifications. Well, once again, because we've done the research, what we know is that those USDA certifications are difficult to lose. You can be a completely inhumane breeder, mass breeder, puppy mill, and it's very difficult to really be shut down by USDA because of the way that they, the way that they oversee those entities.
Yeah,
I get it.
Incapacity, I'm sure.
What?
No, incapacity to, find them and audit them. And some of them have like front businesses, right? But then they also have like the mills off site that are kind of being pumped and funneled through there's like a lot of, it's difficult.
Well, if you go back and you read the violations, it's so troubling because, because those inspections only happen periodically. They'll come around and let's say it's a hot summer day in Missouri, and they'll say, these are structures that don't have ventilation, and these animals are going to need some ventilation, and they'll give them a whole checklist. Doesn't mean they ever lost their ability to mass breed. Doesn't mean that those, that the mothers that are having puppies every chance that every cycle that they have aren't really medically being physically abused. It just means that they've identified something by walking through the property. So what that doesn't even account for is that they'll say, okay, no problem, we went ahead and put in a fan. Now we've got a fan in this area. It's still not insulated, it's got a fan, and it's still not a well ventilated area. Well, then we got to freeze. And some of the stories that came out of there, or some of the investigations that came out, were heartbreaking about animals freezing to death.
Right.
Because they're disposable. They consider this like a crop, and they're disposable. And the citizens in this county didn't see it that way. They don't see it that way. They care. And there was an outpouring of support for trying to make sure that if we can't shut them down up there, that we at the bare minimum shouldn't give them an outlet here to sell, and shouldn't give them the ability to set up a business here. And that's what they had done in some of the retail pet stores here.
Right. So stay tuned for that, because the state is they're just throwing everything up in the sky, huh?
It's so to the point of like, find out where they're getting their funding, right? This is interesting to me. When we started discussing our own retail, pet store ban, that this person came in from somewhere in the Midwest, that was this lobbyist that was, working for an organization called Citizens for Responsible Pet Ownership. But once you kind of dug up what that meant, it was the lobbying group for the retail pet store, businesses. And so, you're looking at, some of them are, national chains, and it's big business. You talk about that what they do is they import, low, they buy low and sell high. They're selling those animals for high. And then there's a whole nother cottage industry that takes money from people who have financed this. right? So there's these third-party financiers that come in and they act like you're getting your rooms to go couch, and they're like, oh, you can pay for this for the next 20 years. And then, you have a sick puppy that you fall in love with that now you are going to be paying for, indefinitely with exorbitant interest rates, vet bills, because you're somebody who loves this animal. And so you're not going to give up on this animal. And that's, the residents I spoke with that actually went through this hell after buying a puppy from a retail pet store right down the road from me here in Ocoee. That mom was in tears. She had her children with her, and she said, "We love our dog that we got there. We're not gonna exchange her. What happens?" They said, "We can bring her in for an exchange." And they said,
Right.
"What happens to her after we do that?" And they didn't really give her an answer. And I tried to find
Parent
out
shoes.
what the price list was, Lee. I was like, let me find out what the markup is on this, right? Like if we could find out what the markup is, maybe we can actually give them some tools to reconfigure their business model, right? Because we kind of know that if they're selling services or grooming, that's a great business model for a lot of people. You can't find their prices because it really depends on what your credit score is.
Wow.
It is a consumer
Nightmare.
nightmare. And I mean predatory, and inhumane.
Right. Well, more on that soon. Please, we'll be posting about it. And, we're even probably going to write a little something for the website soon. We have interns this semester working on that. We have a couple more things and we're kind of running out of time. So I know that the Big Sand Lake Advisory Board meetings, Commissioner, you were very, day one, insistent upon the fact that I attend all of those meetings because there had been a lot of projects that seem to have been kind of taking a while to get going. And I think this is an exciting update for those who have been waiting for that right to entry for the pumping project. So the consent agenda, if you wanted to talk about that.
Yes. Well, I want to start out by thanking, first of all, the citizens of the Dr. Phillips area, the Big Sand Lake Advisory Board, the leadership there, and you, Lee, for staying the course. Those advisory board meetings are on Tuesday evenings, which is, of course, when we have our Board of County Commissioners meeting. So I am so grateful that you're able to be there and represent the good people of District 1 and make sure that we are, doing everything we can to advance their priorities and the things that they've voted for in their advisory board. The issue with water quality and water quantity has always been, sort of this, okay, we understand they're connected, but we can't get to quality until we get some of the quantity questions answered. And yes, so the exciting update here after all this time, and this, I think that they voted on this the month before I came into office, was that they wanted to make sure that they had the ability to pump water down to get that quantity low, knowing that some of the quality issues may be as a result of the quantity. And clearly there's also people are really concerned about their private property and should be. This is concerning. There has always been the understanding that whatever's going on over in I-4 and with the I-4 Ultimate Project has an impact. And we, from day one in this office, Lee has not left any stone unturned. Hannah has pestered everyone at the DOT. I have walked up to people at MetroPlan. So we've been working really hard and meeting in-house with EPD, our Environmental Protection Division, with our county administrators, with people in our planning division, with people in our stormwater division, to really try to get solutions. And so there's no magic bullet, right? At the end of what I feel like has been this really long and drawn out journey, the outfall pumping has the access to some private property that will allow the pumping to happen where it needs to happen, will be approved on Tuesday based on the vote that the Big Sand Lake Advisory Board made. So it's referenced in here. And we're going to share all of this information verbatim because there's too much for me to really kind of distill. And then the other part of it is that within this document, the agreement to access the easement for pumping is also an attachment that explains the agreement that was done in 2019 with the Department of Transportation to take care of that water. So we're going to share all of this and continue to get information about that timeline from the Department of Transportation, and any of the agreements that were put into place that maybe have missed a deadline, and what kind of obligations Department of Transportation might have to the residents in the Dr. Phillips area. So we'll keep fighting for you out there. Thank you for hanging in there with us and working with us on all of this, issue.
Awesome. Yes. Also, you've been really trying to keep people informed about redistricting, and I feel like that process is finally coming up to a work session this Tuesday, and then eventually a public hearing as well at the end of February.
Yeah, so just to back up a little bit on this one also, if you're a new follower or a new resident to Orange County, just like, other counties and other areas of our government, representation is based on population. And every 10 years, the census tells us what population looks like in different areas. And the county has grown, obviously, from corner to corner, but some areas have grown faster than others. And District 1 is one of those. It's beautiful. I love my district. And it is significantly larger than the other districts. And the idea of redistricting is to make the districts fair and equitable so that each district is fairly represented by a certain number within a range of each other. So District 1 is going to lose a lot of residents into neighboring districts. And the challenge in District 1 is, of course, because we're West Orange County, that we hit Lake County on one side, we hit Osceola County to the south. And so we are, to some extent, hemmed in geographically, which means that any changes have to be made to the north, along that eastern boundary. And so the maps that were brought forward from the various people on the advisory board, and I just want to also really thank the individuals who gave their time so freely and really dug in on the advisory board for redistricting. I know it was a heavy lift. Thank you all so much. There were appointees from each commission district that were able to submit maps. The public could submit maps. It was very public facing. And so there were meetings every week throughout, and they came down to 2 maps that are being submitted to the board on Tuesday for consideration. In both of those maps, all of Ocoee is removed from District 1. So needless to say, I'm really sad because this is my community. So, if you look at the map, I'm very close to the edge of Ocoee, and many of the residents that talked me into doing this job may be leaving this district. And I just want to tell you that if you have any thoughts about it, to please take a look at the maps. If you go to Orange County, Florida, and just put in your explore bar, that you are looking for Orange County, Florida redistricting, it'll come up and you can see what the 2 maps are that are being submitted by the the advisory board, and you can take a look at where you are on that map. We are going to lose parts of Metro West and part of Ocoee, and I mean, if one of those maps goes. And so the commission will get to talk about it in the sunshine on Tuesday.
Awesome. Also, we got our first briefing on the transportation sales tax, which will be also a work session on Tuesday.
Yeah, stay tuned for this one. If you have questions out there as residents of Orange County and residents of District 1, you're not alone. I have outstanding questions. I have existing questions. I am very motivated to try to help make sure that in my tenure that we move towards better transportation options, transit options, mass transit. I have been really prioritizing pedestrian and bike accessibility, the ability for people to not be dependent on a car to get around their community. And so those questions have to be answered for me before we get to, I guess what's going to end up being either a recommendation or not, to be able to put a transportation initiative on a referendum. what that referendum is it goes to the voters. And so, depending on what comes out of the county's plans and what the county is saying that they want to do with that additional sales tax revenue, the voters will eventually get to decide. But it doesn't even get to that point if the county commission doesn't approve it. So there's a lot of questions still out there. We're going to get a presentation. I'm really excited to share with everybody what we get. I've been really fortunate to meet with our municipal partners. I even, had a chance to speak with the new manager of Winter Garden this week. I've had several conversations, Windermere and Oakland, about what their concerns are, that we really, as West Orange, need to have a cohesive plan. You can't be a patchwork looking transportation across the county just because there's municipal differences. And so having that cohesive plan and knowing that the priority for all of us has been a walkable, bikeable community that has true transit options, gives me great optimism, but there's a lot of unanswered questions.
Right. So please tune in there, and then there'll be a series of town halls where we'll be out in the community educating people and bringing information to residents. Obviously, please sign up for the newsletter at NicoleWilson.org so that you can be on the pulse of everything. And of course, email district1@ocfl.net if you have any questions or want to see any supporting documents as we receive them here at the office too.
Absolutely. Anything that we have, we will pass on. I know sometimes it probably feels like we are oversharing, but transparency is a high priority. And I think, before I got here and I came from the outside world, I felt like my distrust was sometimes placed in the mystery of it. And so trying to dispel the myths, pull back the veil and get all that information out there. And if you have questions that you want me to bring to my board, that's what I am here to do. If you have criticisms, that's what I'm here to do. So, we'll just keep making sure to get that dialogue back and forth.
Right. Well, in closing, we have some updated events that we will be posting all over social media. One that Florida Department of Transportation actually is hosting is a virtual, and they will have eventually in-person meetings for the I-4 Ultimate project. So that will be February 10th. So please keep an eye on that. We also have the fertilizer public hearing that will be on the fertilizer ordinance on February 8th. That'll be after 2 o'clock in the afternoon on that Tuesday. We already have people emailing about the language. There's actually an email, fertilizer@ocfl.net, that you can email if you want to either see the language specifically, or if you have questions and you want to talk to the experts about that. Definitely email.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for all of the people that have really jumped in on these discussions, because without those extra voices, without the expertise, without the, I think the advocacy, we wouldn't be able to move it forward. So thank you so much to all those people. And Lee, before we sign off, I also want to thank you for, and Hannah, we have a new group of interns that have come in this semester that we are just so excited. First of all, having that connection with our young people is so important, because the civic engagement component of government at this level isn't taught in our schools. And a lot of people that we talk to are interested and curious and want to know how to plug in, or they're on a career path that is really very much involved in what we're trying to get done. So having that opportunity to engage them and have them work with us makes my heart so happy. It gives me such great optimism. And I know it takes a lot of time, but I'm just really grateful for it. And I'm thankful for those interns who have the heart and the passion to be here working on behalf of the people of Orange County.
Right. I mean, government in general is very intimidating. I'm intimidated every day. I wake up feeling like, am I qualified to even get out of bed today? I don't know. But, I think that building your resume and being able to just kind of dip your toe in the water is something that people want the opportunity to do. And internships really open the door for that. they're not necessarily diving into policy, but they are getting a taste for what it's like behind the scenes. And then I'm here to answer any questions they might have. And you take them out to lunch at the end of the semester so they get some one-on-one time with the commissioner. I mean, what's better than that?
I love it. And I just think it's so important for, like you said, as far as, having the ability. And I think about the times that I sort of started to hone in on what I wanted to do with my career. And it was those real life experiences. And, I know that it can't be the case for everybody because of course we have such a kind of have a limited staffing option, but, Hannah, that's how we got Hannah, right? Like you think about what internships bring in career paths, and it opens doors and makes that resume building process so vibrant.
Oh yeah, I mean, we couldn't do this without Hannah. She's incredible. And then last but not least, we have the February 16th proposed bus compound that is OCPS. They're planning that event. It'll be a community engagement opportunity to talk about their proposal for the bus compound coming.
Yeah, can I go on this real quick?
Yeah.
So if you have heard about some of the movement going on at West Orange Tech, which I know a lot of my friends out here, their kids went there and they went there, and West Orange Tech is a historic school in East Winter Garden. And there has been discussion about what is going to come next in that building. And, in the mix has been a bus depot, which I think I'm going to be very public about opposing. I think that was an actual perfect location for a technical school and for certification programs. And I would love to see actually increased certification programs there. We have a shortage right now of all kinds of experts. We need plumbers and electricians, right, and welders and carpenters, and to have that certification program right in an area that has been really growing in its employer base, right? We have some really great new big employers that have opened up in the Winter Garden area. So I'm going to fight a little bit here or be vocal, I should say, about keeping a certification and training program right there where it is in Winter Garden. And so please join us for that. Hopefully we'll be able to engage some problem solving with the city of Winter Garden. We are in full agreement and support of each other in this, and making sure that OCPS hears residents and our concerns about changing that over. We don't need a bus depot there. We need certification programs.
Right. All right, Commissioner. So in closing, is there anything you'd like to say as we sign off this week?
Whew, thanks for hanging in there with me. I know I was like, whew, just had to get a lot out there. So if there was any questions that come up, please reach out, and thank you for coming along with us on this and continuing to communicate with our office.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening. See you next week.
Next week.
Bye.